For 15 years, General Dale Whitmore had not spoken a single word, not to his doctors, not to his attorneys, not to the 2 grown children who still drove him to every appointment that never worked. He had commanded 3 brigades, 2 combat tours, and a forward operating base outside Fallujah that his men still called by his nickname. And then one Thursday morning in October of 2009, an IED took that voice out of him on a road that isn't on any map that civilians can buy. What came next? What one speech therapist in a VA hallway in San Antonio did 15 years later with a device she had carried in the bottom of her bag every single day and never once opened, is the reason I'm telling you this story tonight. Before we go any further, do me one small favor. Hit that like button, drop a comment telling me what city or state you're listening from, and subscribe to Hidden Badges Stories so you don't miss what comes next. Thank you for being here. Now let's begin. Sloan Merritt did not look like someone who had once been extracted by helicopter from a mountainside in Kunar province, with 3 cracked ribs and a dislocated shoulder, which was, she had always felt, the point. She was 39 years old, 5'6", auburn hair she kept pulled back with a single rubber band, not a clip, because clips broke and rubber bands didn't. Her scrubs were the bright, particular blue of an August sky in Texas, the kind of color that could be spotted from across a floor when someone needed help fast. A small pin sat above her name badge. A silver compass rose on a dark green field, worn down at the edges. No one on the VA's 5th-floor speech and language unit had ever asked what it meant. She had been at the Hargrove Veterans Medical Center in San Antonio for 8 years. She was a licensed speech-language pathologist, board-certified, with a secondary credential in traumatic brain injury rehabilitation that she had cross-trained for on her own time. She moved through the unit the way people move when they have learned, in other places, to make as little sound as possible. Her right hand, the one with the long pale scar from the base of her thumb to her wrist, rested habitually on the chart rail as she walked. Nobody asked about that scar either. It was a Tuesday in March. She had been on the floor since 6:15. By 8:45 she had completed 2 fluency assessments, recalibrated an augmentative communication device for a stroke patient in room 12, and replaced a feeding tube cuff the night staff had installed backward. She was writing in the margin of a paper chart. She still used paper for intake, old habit, when the elevator at the end of the hall opened and a family came through. There were 3 of them. The woman in front was in her late 30s, dark-haired, moving with the particular set of someone who had been doing this for a long time and had decided not to show how tired she was. Behind her, a young man in his mid-20s with a University of Texas sweatshirt pushed a wheelchair, and in the chair sat a man. He was large in the way that men are large when they have been physically exceptional for a long time. The shoulders were still broad, but forward now. His hands sat in his lap with a stillness that wasn't peace. It was the stillness of a man who had run out of things to reach for. He wore a dark gray sweater, collar open. He was 61 or looked it. The skin under his eyes was the color of old newspaper. And at the base of his throat, just above the hollow where the collar fell open, Sloan saw it. She stopped walking. The scar was small, maybe 3 centimeters, horizontal, clean, slightly pink even after all this time. To anyone else in that hallway, it would have looked like an old tracheotomy scar. Surgeons made that incision 10 times a day. There was nothing unusual about it. Except the angle was wrong. A standard track approached the midline. This incision sat 2 centimeters left of center, angled slightly downward toward the thyroid cartilage. Not a track, not even close. It was a lateral laryngeal access incision, specifically positioned for direct implantation of a subthyroid neural stimulator, a device and procedure that had been developed between 2005 and 2010 under a joint DARPA and Special Operations Medical Research Initiative that was, on paper, a pilot study on blast injury rehabilitation. Off paper it was something else entirely. Sloan knew, because she had spent 2.5 years in that program before it was shut down, and because she had made that incision herself 12 times on 12 different men, in conditions she was not allowed to describe in any document that carried her name. She breathed through her nose. She walked toward the family. "Good morning." Her voice was even. "I'm Sloan Merritt. I'm the lead SLP for the unit today. Can I help you get checked in?" The woman spoke first. "I'm Beth Whitmore. This is my brother Cooper." She glanced at the man in the chair. "And this is our father, General Dale Whitmore, U.S. Army retired." Sloan did not let her face change. Inside, something shifted, like a compass needle that has been held off true north for a very long time and is very slowly beginning to correct. "It's an honor to meet you, General." The general did not look up. His jaw was set. He stared at his hands. Beth kept going because someone had to. "We've been to 3 VA hospitals and 2 civilian centers in the last 4 years. His injury is from 2009, outside Fallujah. Blast trauma to the laryngeal nerve complex. That's what they've told us. Every specialist has said the damage is irreversible. But 2 months ago, a doctor at Fort Sam Houston mentioned a name. Dr. Leonard Fuchs, here in your speech center. He published something about residual laryngeal nerve mapping in blast injury patients. We've been waiting 7 weeks for this appointment. Sloane nodded. She looked at the intake folder in Beth's hand but did not take it. General, may I take your vitals? The general raised his head. His eyes were gray-green, deep-set, the eyes of a man who had read terrain for 40 years and was reading her now. He nodded once. She wrapped the cuff, took the readings, and then gently she moved his collar aside 1/2 inch. The scar was exactly what she had thought it was. 3 centimeters lateral of midline, the subcutaneous edges still slightly proud. The way tissue heals when the foreign object underneath never comes out. General, she kept her voice quiet, were you ever treated in the field, by a medic or corpsman, before you were evacuated? The general looked at her for a long moment. He was a man who had spent his career assessing people in seconds. He assessed her now. He lifted his right hand from his lap slowly and touched the base of his own throat. He pointed at the scar with one finger. Yes, Sloane said. Do you know what was done? He shook his head once, small, deliberate. Thank you, sir. She closed his collar back and straightened up. She had just returned to her notes when the office door at the end of the unit opened and Dr. Leonard Fuchs came out. He was 63, silver-haired, with the bearing of a man who had been photographed for too many institutional brochures. His coat was pressed. The name badge read Department Chief, Speech and Language Medicine, Hargrove, VA. He carried a tablet in one hand and did not look at the family until he was 6 feet away. He looked at the intake folder instead. Whitmore. He said it the way people say a word they have already decided is not interesting. I've reviewed the imaging from Fort Sam. There is significant bilateral damage to the RLN and SLN. The scarring is extensive. General, I want to be direct with you. There is no intervention, surgical or therapeutic, that recovers function in a case with this profile and this duration. 15 years of disuse has rendered the muscular architecture of your larynx non-viable for rehabilitation. I can offer you an updated AAC device and a palliative consult. He handed the tablet to Sloane without looking at her. Merritt, get the family set up with our device coordinator and pull the referral list for long-term. Dr. Fuchs. Her voice was not loud, it was not sharp, it was the particular flat tone of someone who had once, in a different life, given orders in situations where a raised voice could get people killed. Fuchs stopped. May I have a moment with you in the hall? He blinked, then smiled the small, tight smile of a man who has just been mildly surprised by the weather. Merritt, I don't take clinical direction from. Dr. Fuchs, same flatness. Cooper's hand tightened on the wheelchair handles. The general raised his chin 1/4 inch. One moment, Sloane said, before this family leaves. Fuchs looked at her for 3 seconds. Then he walked into the hall. Sloane followed, the door closed behind them. Make this fast, he said, and understand that it won't happen again. Sloane's hands were loose at her sides. The general has a lateral laryngeal access scar, left of midline, angled at approximately 17 degrees, subcutaneous implant marker still palpable at the inferior margin. Fuchs stared at her. What? It's not a tracheotomy scar, it's an implantation scar. Specifically for a subthyroid neural bridge, a device that routes low-amplitude stimulation signals along the recurrent laryngeal nerve pathway as a bypass for blast-severed conduction. The program it came from was classified under the DARPA Blast Neuro Recovery Initiative from 2005 to 2011. Partially declassified in 2018. It has never appeared in mainstream speech pathology literature. Fuchs's expression moved through several things quickly. Skepticism, irritation, and then, underneath both of those, something that might have been fear. That technology doesn't exist. It does, Dr. Fuchs. It exists in a 20-page technical appendix on page 114 of the 2018 DARPA declassification packet, published as a footnote. I know, because I helped write the original protocol. A pause. Who are you? Sloane looked at him steadily. I'm the SLP on call today. Now, I'd like to go back in there and assess your patient before his family drives back to Houston empty-handed. If I'm right, and I believe I am, you'll want to be in that room. Fuchs's jaw tightened. Merritt, if you touch that patient with anything outside standard of care protocol, I will have you escorted out of this building and your license reviewed before end of week. Sloane turned and walked back through the door. Beth looked up immediately. Cooper had moved to stand beside his father, arms crossed, feet planted like someone who had decided, without being asked, that he was not moving. Sloane crouched at the side of the wheelchair. She brought herself level with the general's face. Her right hand, the one with the scar, rested on the armrest. She did not touch him yet. General Whitmore, very quiet. I'd like to examine the scar on your throat and run a brief assessment. I'm not going to make you any promises I can't keep. I haven't done this in a long time. But I think the medic who treated you in the field that night may have given you something that nobody in 15 years has known how to look for." She paused. "I need your permission, sir." The general looked at her for a long time. He looked at the compass rose pin above her name badge. He looked at the scar on her right hand. He looked at her eyes. He was a general. He had been reading people across a table, across a desert, across 20 years of hard decisions. He read her now. He lifted his chin half an inch. He nodded. The door opened behind them. Fuchs walked in. His face had settled into something flat and deliberate. "Merritt, I have called patient services. The general will be discharged in." "Dr. Fuchs." Beth stepped forward. "We have driven 4 hours. We have been to 6 facilities in 4 years. My father has not spoken in 15 years. Her voice did not shake. "She is going to have 6 minutes, and you're going to let her." Cooper did not speak. He just stood there, which was enough. Fuchs opened his mouth. No. It was the general. Not a word, technically. A sound. One controlled, deliberate exhalation shaped into the consonant and the vowel, with every shred of muscular control he had left in a larynx that hadn't functioned in a decade and a half. It was barely audible. It was the roughest, most broken sound in the room. But it was a word, and it had weight, and everyone in the room felt it. Fuchs went still. The general looked at him. The gray-green eyes were steady. He pointed one finger at Sloane. Fuchs did not speak. He did not leave. Sloane stood. She walked to the supply cabinet, opened it, and removed a penlight and a standard-issue tongue depressor. Then she reached into the bag she had left on the counter when she walked in, a battered olive canvas tote she had carried to every shift for 8 years, and removed a flat, sealed pouch wrapped in gray fabric. It was about the size of a paperback book. The edges were worn. The seal had never been broken. Until now. Fuchs took one step forward. "What is that?" "Laryngeal nerve assessment kit." She unsealed the pouch along the edge. The fabric opened to reveal a thin rectangular panel, dark gray, flexible, with 12 small silver contact nodes arranged in a grid pattern on one side. In a sewn pocket at the corner, a small controller. Black, barely larger than a car key fob, 1 dial, 1 button. "That is not standard VA equipment." "No, Dr. Fuchs, it is not." "Where did you get that?" "I built it. The original was government property. The schematics were declassified in 2018. This one I constructed in 2021 from declassified specifications for personal research purposes. I have documentation." She looked at him once, evenly. "You can call security, doctor. But first I'm going to ask the general one question." She turned back to the wheelchair. "General Whitmore, may I remove your sweater and open your collar?" He nodded. Beth moved before he finished. She unzipped the gray sweater with hands that were careful and practiced. The hands of someone who had dressed and undressed her father for years, without making it feel like being dressed and undressed. Cooper lifted the weight of the fabric from his father's shoulders. Underneath, a simple white undershirt, the general's neck and chest were exposed. And at the base of his throat, below the small lateral scar, Sloane noticed the second mark. Smaller, barely visible. A faint round elevation in the skin, about 4 millimeters, slightly discolored. To anyone who didn't know what they were looking at, it was a mole, or an old cyst removal. Nothing. To Sloane, it was a beacon. "Dr. Fuchs," she said. She did not look up. "Come look at this." He did not move. "Doctor," still calm, "if I am right about what is under that skin, this is going in a journal. Your name goes on the paper if you are standing in this room when it happens. That is the only time I will offer you this." 2 seconds passed. Then Fuchs walked to her left shoulder and stopped. Sloane placed the pad of her right index finger gently on the small round elevation at the base of the general's throat. Her left palm rested flat against his sternum. She closed her eyes. She pressed. The general made a sound. Not a word, not anything shaped. A raw, involuntary intake of breath, the kind a person makes when something dormant and unreachable sends a single faint pulse from a very long distance away. Like a radio signal from a station everyone had stopped listening for. Beth gasped. Her hand went to her mouth. Cooper made no sound, but the color drained from his face and then came flooding back. Fuchs leaned forward. "What did you just do?" Sloane opened her eyes. "I pressed the implant marker, doctor. There is a subthyroid neural bridge seated below that mark, a device that maintains low-amplitude conduction bypass along the RLN when native nerve function is compromised. It does not repair the nerve, it routes around the damage. The larynx still has the bridge, which means the larynx has had signal all along. 15 years of disuse on top of it. 15 years of the muscles sitting idle. But the signal, doctor, the signal is still there." Fuchs's face had gone pale around the eyes. "That technology is real, and is sitting in this man's throat right now." She turned to the general. His eyes were on her face. Sir, I am going to place this mat against your throat, external, below the jaw. I will pulse the 12 contact nodes in a specific sequence. You may feel pressure, you may feel warmth, you may feel vibration. If anything causes pain, say so or signal me, and I stop immediately. The general's jaw moved. He pressed his lips together once, a small gesture that in a different life she might have recognized as the way a man prepares himself for something he is not sure he can survive hoping for. He nodded. Cooper, Sloane said, "Hold your father's shoulders steady, please." The young man moved behind the wheelchair without a word. His hands came down gently on his father's shoulders. Sloane unfolded the mat against the front of the general's throat. Contacts to skin, she removed the small controller from its pocket. Dial to 1, button pressed. The general blinked. His eyes went slightly wide. She looked at him. "What do you feel, sir?" His mouth opened. He exhaled slowly. And then, with the enormous labored precision of a man moving a muscle that has been still for 15 years, he shaped the air. Warm. One word, barely above a whisper, rough as gravel, cracked at the edges, but articulate formed, intentional. Beth made a sound that was not quite a word and not quite a name. She took 2 steps forward, and then stopped because her legs had stopped working reliably. Cooper's hands on his father's shoulders gripped once, hard, and did not let go. The general was staring at the middle distance. He was breathing with great deliberateness, the way a man breathes when he has decided he will not lose his composure in front of witnesses. His eyes were bright and dry and very, very still. Fuchs had not moved. His tablet had dropped to his side. He stood 3 feet from the wheelchair, and he looked like a man watching something he had been told his entire career was impossible. Sloane turned the dial to 2. She pressed the button. The general's throat moved. He swallowed. He opened his mouth. Beth. His daughter's name. Said with the worn particular tenderness of a man who had spoken it 10,000 times before the silence, and had not been able to say it once since. Beth Whitmore pressed both hands over her mouth. Tears ran down her face in 2 straight lines, and she did not wipe them. She stood completely still, as if any movement might break something. Cooper bowed his head against the top of his father's head. His shoulders shook once, twice, and were still. He did not make a sound. The general looked down at his hands. His throat worked. 1 tear, exactly 1, traced the line of his jaw and fell. Sloane turned the dial back to 0. She set the controller on the counter. She stood. Dr. Fuchs. Her voice was level. "I need a full laryngeal CT with soft tissue protocol, an EMG of the intrinsic laryngeal musculature, and a referral to voice rehabilitation physical therapy with a clinician experienced in chronic neuromotor disuse today. The general needs to be admitted for overnight monitoring." She paused. "And I need you to be the attending of record on this case." Fuchs opened his mouth. He closed it. "I understand," he said. It was, Sloane observed, the quietest she had ever heard him speak. By noon, the CT was done. The report came back from radiology with language the radiologist, a 20-year veteran named Dr. Patricia Vance, had never written before. Intact bridge structure, subthyroid placement, non-degraded, signal active. She came down from the imaging suite herself to find Sloane, which Dr. Vance had not done for anyone in 9 years. How long has he been carrying this? Since October 2009. And no one knew what to look for. Dr. Vance sat down very carefully in the nearest chair. By 2 o'clock, Cooper had gone to the cafeteria and come back with 3 sandwiches and a determination in his face that had replaced the shock. He set one in front of Sloane at the nursing station counter. She ate it standing up while she wrote notes on her legal pad, in the shorthand of someone who had spent years writing things that other people were not authorized to read. At 3, the general asked for her. She walked in. He was dressed again, collar closed, but something in the way he held his head was different, 1/8 of an inch higher, the shoulders not quite so forward. She sat on the exam stool at eye level with him. His voice was barely a whisper when he spoke, but it was a voice. "What's your name? Your real name?" Sloane was quiet for a moment. She looked at Beth, she looked at Cooper, she looked back at him. "Sloane Merritt," she said, "that part's real." "What part isn't?" She placed her hands on her knees. She made a small decision. "Staff Sergeant Sloane Merritt," she said, 18 Delta. Army Special Forces Medical Sergeant. I served with the 5th Special Forces Group from 2003 to 2011. From 2008 to 2011, I was attached to the DARPA Blast Neuro Recovery Initiative at Fort Detrick. We identified and tracked soldiers who had received subthyroid neural bridge implantation in the field. Most of them implanted by 18 Deltas like me, in the first hours after injury, when we had maybe 40 minutes to make a decision that the protocol said could preserve conduction indefinitely. We were building a formal rehabilitation program, a protocol to reactivate the bridges, rebuild the muscle. We were 18 months from publishing. She paused. The program was closed in 2011. Budget restructuring. The bridges were still in those men. Nobody was authorized to tell them. Nobody was authorized to treat them. I was told I had no right to contact any of the 43 names on my list. I fought that order through every channel I had. I lost. I separated from the Army in 2012. I went to graduate school for speech-language pathology. I came to San Antonio because 2 of the 43 names on my list had last known addresses in Texas. I have worked at this VA for 8 years. I have walked past men in this building every day and looked at their throats and waited. She stopped. The general looked at her for a long, long time. The gray-green eyes were very quiet. I was on that list. Yes, sir, number 7. He closed his eyes. He kept them closed for almost a full minute. Cooper's hand moved to his father's shoulder and stayed there. When the general opened his eyes, he spoke very quietly. Sergeant Merritt, I have spent 15 years believing the silence was permanent. I told my children to stop hoping. I stopped hoping myself. His voice caught, rebuilt. You are the first person in 15 years who looked at me and saw something besides a closed case. He reached across the small space between them and held out his right hand. Sloan took it. He did not grip hard. He gripped with the deliberate, measured pressure of a man who means what he does, and he held on. Thank you, he said. His voice broke on the second word. He let it. The rest of that week moved fast and then slow and then fast again. Fuchs met with the hospital director that evening. By Thursday morning, Sloan had been given clinical lead status on the case with Fuchs as nominal attending, an arrangement that had never existed at Hargrove before, and that 3 senior physicians found either absurd or fascinating depending on temperament. Dr. Vance requested a joint consult. A voice rehabilitation specialist named Dr. Aaron Prieto, who had worked 2 years at BAMC before coming to civilian practice, was brought in and told to report to Sloan. He arrived on Wednesday, read the protocol summary she handed him in 30 minutes, and said, I've been waiting for something like this since 2013. What do you need? 2 days after the general's first session, a woman named Judy Callister called from Lubbock. Her husband Raymond had been a Green Beret, IED 2007, same scar, same silence, 18 years. Sloan closed her eyes when she heard the description. She opened them and wrote the name on her legal pad. Raymond Callister, Lubbock, 18 years. Mrs. Callister, she said, someone can help. I need you to bring Raymond to San Antonio. Can you come Friday? We can come tomorrow, Judy said. Friday is better. We'll be ready. Does it really work, after all this time? Sloan was quiet for a moment. I can't promise you he'll recover his full voice. 18 years is 18 years. But I can tell you that the bridge is almost certainly still viable. And the first thing he's going to feel, when I press that marker, is that the bridge has been carrying a small load in him all this time, and we're going to let that load release. His body is going to rest in a way it hasn't rested since 2007. On the other end of the line, Judy Callister went very quiet. Okay, she said. We'll be there Friday. Not everyone could be reached. 3 names on Sloan's list were dead, 2 from causes unrelated to the injury, 1 from complications she didn't want to think about too long, 2 she couldn't locate at all, and 1, a Marine named Theodore Greer from Pensacola, had an implant too degraded for the protocol to work. She sat with him for 40 minutes in a room on the 3rd floor and told him the truth, all of it, including what she couldn't do. He gripped her hand at the end. You came back for us, he said. That's enough. That's more than enough. He passed away 11 weeks later. His wife wrote Sloan a letter, 1 line. He knew somebody had remembered him. Sloan kept it in the top drawer of her desk. 5 months after the Tuesday morning, Sloan Merritt walked down the hall of the 5th floor unit and saw a scar she had been looking for in throats for 8 years. Hargrove VA held a gathering in the hospital's main conference room. No press, no cameras. The families had asked for that and the administration had agreed. There were 11 men in the room who had not been able to speak above a whisper, or at all, when Sloan opened that pouch in March. 9 of them spoke at the gathering, some in full sentences, some in fragments, some in single words they had chosen ahead of time and practiced every morning for 3 weeks. 2 were still early in the process, building back slowly, but they were there. They sat in the front rows in their service uniforms. Army, Marine, Navy. Some of the uniforms needed letting out at the shoulders. The men had put muscle back on. Some needed taking in at the waist. They had all refused the suggestion of civilian clothes. The general spoke last. He walked to the front of the room without his cane. He had used one for the first 6 weeks and then, on a Tuesday morning in the voice therapy room, told Dr. Prieto to move it out of reach. He hadn't asked for it back. He gripped the sides of the podium. He looked out at the room. When he spoke, his voice was not what it had been in 2009. It was rougher, lower. The timbre of a man who had rebuilt something from the foundation up, and knew the difference between what was there before and what was there now. But it was his voice, and it filled the room. "I was silent for 15 years, he said. "I was told by 9 specialists in 5 states that I would be silent for the rest of my life. I told my children to stop hoping. I told myself the same thing." He paused. The room was absolutely still. On a Tuesday morning in March, a woman in blue scrubs came down the hall and did her job. She looked at me, not at my file, not at my imaging, at me, and she saw something that 9 specialists in 15 years had missed. His eyes moved across the front rows. Man by man they met his gaze. A few of them nodded. "I want to thank Hargrove VA and everyone in this room who has worked on this program. I want to thank my children, Beth and Cooper, who drove me to 6 hospitals in 4 years and never once told me to stop trying, even when I told them to." He looked toward the back of the room, where Fuchs was standing with his hands behind his back, silver hair still precisely parted. One strand escaped at the temple. "I want to thank Dr. Leonard Fuchs, who had the particular courage it takes for a man of his position to step back and let someone else be right." Fuchs did not move, but something in the line of his jaw shifted slightly. "And I want to ask one person to come forward." The general's eyes found the second row, where Sloane was sitting in the bright vivid blue of her scrubs, the compass rose pin above her name badge, her hands folded in her lap. "Sergeant Merritt," he said, "would you come up here, please?" She had not been told this was coming. She had been told there would be remarks. She had not been told her name would be spoken. She stood. She walked to the front. Her shoes were quiet on the carpet. Her hands were loose at her sides. The general stepped from behind the podium. He did not need to hold on to anything. He walked the 4 steps to her, slow, deliberate, steady, and stopped in front of her. He brought his right hand up to his temple. He saluted her. In the front rows, 11 men stood up, Marines and soldiers and sailors and airmen, some on canes, some unassisted, some moving slowly, but upright. Each one brought his right hand to his temple. They held it. From the second row, Dr. Aaron Prieto stood. He was not former military. He brought his hand to his temple in the careful approximation of someone who understood what it meant, even if he had not been trained to it. Dr. Vance from radiology stood. So did 2 nurses from the 5th floor unit whom Sloane had not known were there. From the back of the room, Dr. Leonard Fuchs brought his right hand slowly to his temple. It was imperfect. It was genuine. Sloane's throat closed once. She let it. Then she raised her right hand. The one with the shrapnel scar, the one that had pressed the marker, the one that had carried the pouch unopened for 8 years and had not trembled when she finally broke the seal, and she returned the salute. She held it. Then she dropped her hand. The men in the front rows dropped theirs. The room began to applaud. Afterward, the general came to stand beside her near the window. The room was full of movement and voices, actual voices, which still, 5 months in, stopped Sloane sometimes in the middle of a thought. He spoke quietly enough that only she could hear. "The Department of the Army has formally requested that you accept a civilian directorship for a new federal program. Joint VA-OD initiative, nationwide. You'd have the resources, the authority, the reach, all 43 names, the ones we haven't found yet." Sloane looked at the men in the front rows. She looked at Beth, who was laughing at something Cooper had said. She looked at the compass rose pin above her name badge. "General, I'm honored, but no." He did not look surprised. "Tell me why." "Because I found you here, in this building, in these scrubs, not in a federal office with a title and a chain of command that once told me these men were a closed case." She paused. "I'll work with the program. I'll consult, travel, advise, whatever they need. But I keep my badge, and I keep my floor." The general was quiet for a moment. "Understood," he said, and then, very quietly, "Civilian or otherwise, these men are lucky you were looking." Sloane nodded once. She did not say anything else. Raymond Callister and his wife Judy came in from across the room. Raymond was 61, broad-shouldered, wearing army dress greens that had been let out at the chest and were still slightly tight. He had been silent for 18 years before Sloane pressed her finger to the marker on his throat 6 weeks ago, and he had said, in a room with only Judy and Sloane present, the word hello, and then stood there blinking at the sound of his own voice, like a man hearing a language he had spoken his whole life and thought he had lost forever. He did not speak in full sentences yet. He was getting there. But he walked up to Sloane and held out his hand and shook it once. Firm, the way men shake hands when they mean it. "Worth," he said, "just that, worth it." Sloane kept her face composed. "Yes, sir, it is." Judy pressed Sloane's hand between both of hers and held on for a few seconds and did not say anything at all, which was more than enough. Cooper found her near the door as people were beginning to leave. He was 25 and trying not to look like he had been crying, which he had. "My dad wants his study back," he said. "Top of the stairs. We moved him to the ground floor in 2009. He hasn't been up those stairs in 15 years. He stopped. cleared his throat. He went up them last weekend. All the way, he stood at the top for about 5 minutes and didn't say anything, and then he said. Cooper stopped again. He pressed his lips together once. He said, I forgot how good the light is up here. Sloane did not speak for a moment. Cooper, she said, that's the whole reason. He nodded, turned away, walked back toward his father, who was standing near the window in the November light, upright, speaking quietly with another man in a service uniform, his voice low and deliberate and entirely his own. Sloane stood at the door of the conference room for a moment. She put her hand on the compass rose pin above her name badge. Then she walked out, down the hall, past the elevator, past the consultation desk, where Fuchs had once spoken to the wall clock instead of to her, past Bay 5 and Bay 4 and Bay 3, all the way to the end of the corridor. There was a new patient in Bay 7. She could see him through the glass. A man in his 50s, head down, hands still in his lap. His wife stood beside him, gripping the handles of the chair. His adult daughter stood in the corner, arms crossed, eyes red. At the base of the man's throat, just above the collar of his shirt, Sloane saw a small raised mark, horizontal, slightly left of midline. She breathed in through her nose. She pushed the door open. Good morning, I'm Sloane Merritt. I'll be your therapist today. Do you mind if I take a look?